now in the final review on the Spiffy side of things. We have a POC implementation in Spire, which is one of the implementations of the Spiffy standards. The company I work for, Spiral, or now De facto, we also have our own implementation of it already. And now we just kind of need the blessing from the community that this is okay to add in cTunnel, and then we can go into the actual weeds in the PR. Yeah, this keeps coming up. And last time we were asked to kind of just write down our one-pager, how this would be done, and we've done this now.
Okay, appreciate you writing this down in this place. So it looks like the contract is the PID of the workload, correct?
Yes, that is currently the best thing we can, or like not the best thing, but the most thing at hand. There are concerns about PID reuse. I'm super happy to discuss it. We have a couple of ideas to kind of mitigate it. One would be to add the start time, which is like from the proc start, kind of to have the start time in it. The other one would be to work a bit with PID FDs. But this is basic, in my opinion, it's more detail, and I would like to have this discussion done after we kind of have the blessing. Yeah, but as of now, it would be just the PID. As far as I understand, Michael's PR is that he's also, after receiving the cert, he's comparing the PID again to make sure that it has not died and come up again as a different workload. Yeah.
The fundamental issue with PID is not, in my mind, the PID FDS or whether we verify it again. It's why do we have to go through all this dance? Because ultimately, we're trying to find the container or pod, and we're trying to convey that from zTunnel to Spire, or whatever the Spiffy implementation is. And yet we use the PID as this indirection to do it. And there's not a reliable way for zTunnel to actually get a PID. There's ways that are close to reliable, but it feels very indirect to me. Like, is it not possible for us to just send the UID of the pod or something that's something we actually know and it's reliable and achievable?
In general, that's also possible. We have other use cases where we may want to do that as well, to kind of, because sometimes you may even not run on the same node as the pod, and how do you want to know that it's PID? The reason why the PID is currently there is that it's the closest to what is known, like the existing API, the delegate identity API of Spire that works with the PID. That's the one that has been established and so on. And you can inspire and other implementations, you can extend the process where we then attest the PID and get attributes from it, right? So, and you can actually, customers can build their own attesters, extend it at runtime, and kind of collect their own metadata based on the PID. So if we start to get higher up the stack and, for example, pass in pod references, that whole thing starts to crumble down, and it's a much higher lift on our side as well. Yeah.
But isn't it like we're just guessing a PID? So there's no way a user could reliably use anything related to PIDs, right? Like,
I'm not totally familiar of how cTunnel gets to the PID. My understanding is that Michael uses the CRI API to kind of get from container ID to PID.
Yeah, but a container doesn't have just one PID at one time, or a pod does not have, right? They're ephemeral. The container can restart. You can spin PIDs up and down. You know, anything can happen. So no matter what we're doing, we're just kind of pulling a PID out of a hat, right? So there's no possible way that you can reliably use anything less granular than the pod, because we're just making up a random one within that group, if that makes sense. So if you're saying that we need to use PID so that users can have PID granularity, it doesn't actually work in our use case. Maybe in the general use case, I get that. Like maybe it makes sense to have a PID option. And obviously we can make it work. Like, you know, we can guess a PID. It just feels a bit like we're going in like circular loops, or maybe.
Yeah, I kind of, I kind of get it, right? Because we kind of go from pod level to PID level, only then for us to go from PID level to pod level again.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I'm in general open to kind of use a higher level reference, like for example, the container UID. But I guess my question is if this changes much in the entire idea of integrating Spickly, right? If that's the only concern, then we can definitely work on it. We can probably get the cry interface out of cTunnel or out of that PR. So I'm happy if that's it, then I'm happy to work on it together with Michael.
I think that alleviates most of my concerns. I had similar questions to John, but you guys talked through it. If we can make the contract the pod UID, which is what cTunnel sees, then again, spiffy broker API, I don't think I have much of an issue.
Okay. Michael, I see you've joined.
Yeah. So I do think that, yeah, there is merit to using the pod UID because the PID, is coupled to the container lifecycle. If the PID exits, the container exits, but the pod is still present. So using a higher level construct may make sense, or just adding, I think there's an enum or a message type for worker reference. So possibly using another work pod or UID may make sense here. And if it's like, because we could still do, the Spire agent still could do whatever it needs to do under the covers if it wants to derive the PIDs, the parent PIDs in this case, because a container can have X number of PIDs, or a parent can have multiple children here, so that probably makes sense. And we already get the pod UID over ZDS and WDS too, so we get it in two different directions.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, apart from that, are we then okay? Do we have kind of consent that kind of API details aside, that we can have that integration in cTunnel and work on it? And I suppose, get the PR reviewed once we've made interchanges? Or does the community think we need to come back again to this forum to get more consent?
I'll ask the zTunnel maintainers on the call to weigh in here, because ultimately this is a zTunnel integration. So I see John, Ian, at a high level, API wise, would you be aligned with this direction?
I think it seems like a reasonable direction. I will say that I've previously recused myself from decisions on Spire because people said I was biased, which is questionable. But so I won't vote on it.
I would still like to hear your opinion. Like, okay, or like, I don't know. I would value it.
I mean, yeah, I recognize and respect that, John. I think in this case, because it's zTunnel specific and we have 3 zTunnel maintainers, we need input from those 3, and I don't think Stephen Landau's on the call. So we've got you, we've got Ian, to move forward on this. And I want to make sure we respect Arndt and Zappa's time on this proposal. So we need people's input. Conflict of interest, quote unquote, or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, especially if we get rid of the PID stuff, then I do think it's a reasonable API for what we're trying to do here. So
Cool.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Ian, anything you want to add?
Sorry, I'm on mute. Not offhand. I'll have to take a closer look at it to see if I have any complaints.
Okay, I guess we can take that as tentative, slight direction of yes, good enough to continue. So, aren't Zappa any does that give you what you need? I'll document the responses here in the meeting notes.
Perfect. Thank you for navigating, and thanks for the feedback.
All right, sounds good. We can move on to the next topic then. Mike Krinken, ambient multi-network telemetry update.
Oh yeah, that's another iteration on the multi-network design discussion. So it's a long document. We probably won't be able to discuss all of it in this meeting. So to time box, I would like to pick one topic and discuss encoding of fields that we want to transfer to the peer in our alternative metadata discovery method. So just some brief background. We would like to introduce an alternative peer metadata discovery method that is not based on XDS and instead requires peers to explicitly communicate their metadata details for metrics reporting. And one of the questions that we have is like, how do we actually encode that metadata on the wire, like in the request response? So the high-level idea is that we will put it in the HBone Connect request and response headers. And the actual like, specific encoding proposal is to just use the existing baggage header and encoding that is used by baggage header. And the change will be we will have to populate baggage header in both request and response to HBone Connect, while currently we only put it in the request. And there is also, I think, one field that we will need to add to the baggage header to provide all the information we need, but that one is optional. I did compare it with some alternative encoding methods, mostly like using some binary encoding like protobufs or something like that. And I didn't really find that many benefits in terms of like size that we have to send for two reasons. Basically, since we need to put it into HTTP headers, we are limited what like characters we could put there. So we will have to apply to binary encoded message, something like base 64, and that comes with overhead. That overhead is like not insignificant. But the other part is, given that we send baggage in one direction, it contains almost everything we need. The overhead compared to the current state by just reusing the baggage and like just populating it in response as well seems to be smaller than introducing a completely new field. So all in all, that would be my proposal, unless we have some objections to that.
I don't think Louis is on the call today, but I know he and John had some were asking questions about the size of the encoding and those concerns. I think it makes sense, you know, with small small sizes, the additional encoding is not going to, with strings, is not going to save us too much. So this seems reasonable to me. I also like the call out that it's not going to be worse than Sidecar. So I'm inclined to, and I think Zeton is already sending this baggage. That's correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, we populate baggage in the request. What we will have to add is to populate baggage in the response. That
sure. Okay.
Mark is currently missing.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about the baggage in terms of size and cost. I think it's an appropriate header to use. I did have a question, and I got lost in the noise of some things. We had like another PR that was adding a specific header for network. I was curious if we wanted, like, why is that a different header than baggage?
Oh yeah. So just to clarify, I don't think it has to be like a different header from baggage, to be honest, but it serves slightly different purpose. In the previous week, we kind of decided that we want to the east-west gateway to be transparent, like it shouldn't show up in the metrics in L4 or L7, right? That's the decision that we reached last time. And the problem with that is that the current XDS-based metadata discovery method kind of reports east-west gateway details. Like they are sort of patchy and there's a bunch of unknown fields and so on and so forth. But it like reports in some cases identity, in some cases it reports the east-west gateway workload as a peer, depending on the circumstances. So and given that we reached kind of the decision that the metrics should not show east-west gateway, I think it should be true for both the whatever alternative we are designing now and the current XDS-based peer metadata discovery. And what that header helps us to do is it helps us to propagate to the server side that request went through the east-west gateway. And even if it can discover the metadata of the east-west gateway, it shouldn't use it for populating metric labels. So we could, in principle, put it in the baggage if we wanted to, but it's slightly kind of different purpose. It's not really metadata. It's more to tell us that, well, it came from the east-west gateway.
I see.
And
The other thing I'll add, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, that's not the only alternative, but like for now, we kind of had some ways to figure out somewhat hacky that the request came from east-west gateway. Like, for example, in the tunnel, we check if the authority contains an IP address or a service name. And if it's a service name, we assume that it came from the east-west gateway, which is a bit implicit. But
yeah, that's definitely not what we want to do long term.
So if you're okay with like populating that header, that's fine. Like other alternative would be to like, I don't know, put a note in WDS that says that, well, this is not just a random workload, it's a east-west gateway, but that seems like, oh, well, I mean, I don't think any like fundamental issues with that other than we will be having somewhat ad hoc field in WDS.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Cool.
Louis just joined.
Yeah, but I say, Louis, I see you arrived. We were just talking about the proposal for doing peer exchange and using baggage. And the TLDR is that zTunnel is already sending baggage today. And on the request side, the proposal is to add it to the response side. Mikhail did some testing to see the if there's a better encoding that we can use in TLDRs. Not really. And there's a note there that it's strictly not worse compared to sidecar because with HBOM we get the benefit of multiplexing over a tunnel. So that's the short version. I know you had some questions about the size and the measurements. Is there anything specific you wanted to drill down into on the baggage exchange? Guess not. So Louis, if there's anything else you want to add, there's more in the doc describing it. Unless you want to say something now.
Sorry, I literally got my headphones working 10 seconds ago.
Ah,
Sorry.
that's funny. How much did you hear?
The testing of the size stuff, always in, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
So yeah, testing the size is pretty much the same, not worse than sidecar. Ztone is already sending the baggage, so baggage in this format, and so we're just adding the response side.
In the use of the existing format, where is it being used today again? Sorry.
So we currently send the baggage in the request, and in principle, the tunnel has some logic that can extract peer metadata from baggage and populate metrics based on that. But I think it's primarily not used, and we use just workload metadata directly, like almost always.
Okay, so while it's there, it wasn't used. So it was.
Yeah, it's there in the sense that we do send the baggage over the wire, like it's not disabled, but nobody really depends on it to a significant extent, at least.
Okay. What is it encoding? What does the encoding look like?
It actually encoding almost all the fields that we need, like application name, like namespace, cluster, things like that, about the source workload of the request. Currently.
Is it like a CSV of like?
Yeah, it's a comma separated key value pairs, basically.
Okay.
All text, plain text.
Yeah, maybe just put that in here just so people understand the format.
Yeah, I will put all the details in the design doc to show how the format is going to look and what exact fields and how we want to encode there, and all the additional fields that will be there.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions, or Mikhail, do you want to talk about next steps for this and how?
I want to be conscious of time and other topics.
Sure.
But like TLDR, we are experimenting with implementations. The design is long. I will probably be updating it for a while, but it keeps. I am updating it, and if you have time, please go take a look, review, left comment. Since the last meeting, I added a bunch of stuff there, and there are more coming, but yeah.
If folks want to follow along with code, where should they look?
We basically created an experimental branch in the tonal proxy and I think Istio repository. We are not pushing anything to master, but it's visible there. What kind of things we need to do to implement it. So we will be able to see all of that and compare it to the master to see like how big is the change, how complicated it is, and make the call on how do we want to proceed to actually like merging it or not merging it into upstream.
Okay, thank you. To Mikhail's point, we do have some other topics. I'm going to move on to the next one. The next one's mine, along with some others, but I don't think they usually attend. So I wanted to bring back this topic of moving Istio proxy code to Envoy, specifically to answer the question. Well, for a little bit of background. So on some Istio proxy PRs, there is a question of, do we want to wait to merge Istio proxy code until after this has happened? I think the general thought was, let's not wait, but we do want to get an answer for this, both for the 129 release and before the 129 release, if it affects that, and then to figure out if we want to do this at all. So to refresh context, the proposal here is to move all of the source code for the Istio filters to the Envoy proxy repo and keep the E2E tests and the filter selection for Bazel compilation in the Istio proxy repo. Was able to confirm with Quat that we don't that moving will not require senior maintainer review, so we will not be blocked. Contrib extensions only need the extension owners for approval, so we would maintain that ownership. And I think the main question is just how we want to position this if we want to make this change. Any questions on the move? Would love to get people's thoughts and opinions on it so we can get folks an answer. Mike.
I think there was in the previous discussion a concern raised that we will kind of be separating the code of the extensions from end-to-end tests that we use to test those extensions, because the proposal is to move the extensions to the Envoy repository, but keep all the tests here. And I don't think that anybody actually discussed how critical this concern is for us, and whether we have a feasible path forward to address it.
So, want to get to that. Also, want to initially talk about Daniel's point, because I think he's absolutely right, and discuss the timeline aspect. Before we even decide if we want to do this, I think we should just go ahead and rule this out for 129, because we are, branch cuts next Thursday, and this is such a large change that I don't think it's reasonable to wait for it. So, do we have alignment on that point first?
Branch cut already happened.
Not branch cut, code freeze. Code freeze next Thursday.
Yeah, it seems impractical.
Okay, I'll take that as consensus. So no 129. To your point, Mike, about tests. So I think I'll briefly talk about the types of tests that we have in Istio proxy that I know of, and then folks can chime in if I'm missing anything. So we do have we have two types of tests in the repo. We've got regular sort of unit tests that are sort of the G tests, C++ framework that tests the filters. We don't have we've got a decent amount actually. We don't have a ton, but it's very unit tests, based tests for each particular filter. And then in addition to those, we have some Go-based tests that are more integration tests end to end, where requests are sent and we see what stats are actually being generated. I think those unit tests could absolutely be moved to the Envoy repo. I don't see a way feasibly for the end-to-end tests for, to test that metrics get created, the cardinality of the metrics, that the metrics get propagated properly. I don't see a way for those to feasibly ever go into the Envoy repo. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just don't. Based on what I know about the Envoy repo, I don't think the machinery is there for that sort of thing. Not to mention, we actually import the Istio test libraries, and that would just be a hassle to move over if we wanted to. There is the possibility, the potential to convert some of the Go tests into Envoy integration tests, where there's an actual Envoy instance that is spun up and tested that way. So we could, I think, in principle, get to a place where just on the testing side, I think we could potentially get to a place in theory where all the tests end up living in the Envoy proxy repo. There's just work needed to do the conversion. Does anybody have a different view or other context they want to add on the testing aspect of this?
I guess it's still not clear what people think about how big of an issue it is that the tests live separately from the code.
I mean, it's not, without having the integration tests in the Envoy repo, that's not a great precedent.
So how would the tests, would only the test run on the weekly runs, or when branch cut happens and whatever?
No, we still have Automator, right? So every time Envoy changes, we would still bump the SHA and point to a new version of Envoy that would then, for the Envoy branch that we're targeting on the Istio branch, and we get those changes and they'll run whenever the Automator PR is opened and then it gets merged. So it's still, there wouldn't be a decrease in the number of test runs, if I'm understanding properly.
Right, we're just treating them as if they were part of, because we already have this problem with Envoy, right? Like Envoy can make a change and break us. But now it's
Yes.
also applying to our custom filters, which I guess that makes it sound a bit better.
Yeah, I think Mike brings up a good point in the chat that from the dev experience perspective, if I make a change to in the Envoy repo to update, actually, it's a great example because Peter McAllister just made a change to the filter state of one of the pure metadata filters. If there's a change added and the filter state key changed, and you update the unit tests, then you're not going to see, you do that on the Envoy repo. You're not going to see in the Istio repo that, at least immediately, you're not going to see that the filter state key change is going to main metrics show up as unknown because we can't find the right metrics. So there's a delay. You have to basically wait for Automator to run, catch that change, show the testing failure, and then somebody's got to be watching the proxy repo. They see the testing failure and actually go and make the change back in Envoy. So it definitely extends the time, the iteration time for a particular change, because you've got to watch two places.
Well, you can also run the unit test locally and point your local Istio/proxy to your branch or whatever, right?
You can. So you can, when running Bazel, you can sort of point, you can point Istio proxy to your local version of Envoy. So you can get that local validation. We do run some tests, from a variety of different ways with address sanitizers and things like that, that you might not get, and you might not run locally, if you just don't know, or if you're not keen to wait for Envoy to build 4 different times locally. So
Yeah, that's fair.
that is some hassle. Yeah, architecture, that's a good point. I think where I'm at is, from a code ownership perspective, I don't have any concerns. I think having the code live in Envoy would make certain things a lot easier. It would make my life personally easier just because we could then use the Envoy build container instead of the Istio build container, because VS Code doesn't use the Istio build container because we have a 2.0 version of VLibC. So that's just my personal beef. So generally okay with like the goal. The testing concern is a big concern for me. If we can't, I think where I land is that if we can't get the integration tests to also live on the Envoy repo in some way, then I'm probably not for it. Mike, go ahead.
I know from the past experience that IBM folks for PowerPC build of Envoy have sort of customized tests that somehow integrated with the upstream Envoy in some shape or form. I don't know the details, but maybe one thing we could ask is like, is it possible to like plug in there for Istio code in the upstream Envoy our like custom test runner that will report the result somehow and remove the burden of running the tests manually and having like a proper pre-submit there?
I think that would be a prerequisite for me. Yeah, like I shorter iteration, proper pre-submit, and from a logical, from a theoretical perspective, I think we should be able to do all of this. Like, I don't think there's anything about the Go test that we've got that is impossible to run in C++ in the Envoy. Like we already run several Envoy integration tests. We run metrics tests in the Envoy repo. Like you should be able to do this. You can probably have AI convert the tests over if we really wanted to. I just think that if we can do that, then I wouldn't have a problem moving the code over. Assuming that the code owner's file reflects what the Istio project considers to be maintainers for those extensions. And then what that would mean is that this repo just turns into basically build config to pick which filters we put into Istio proxy. That's where I am. Where are other people? Anybody just flat out against the idea, or have other qualifications before they sign on? Go ahead, Mike.
I don't know if it's going to count as a benefit, but essentially, if we convert some of the tests to Envoy repository, those tests will only have to run on the Envoy CI infrastructure, which means less load on the Istio CI infrastructure.
If Envoy is willing to do that, then I mean, I don't think we're going to add that much as well. Like there's not a ton that Istio extensions are doing. Actually, that's a good question. Do contrib extensions run in CI anyway? In Envoy CI?
Probably, because otherwise the build would break all the time and that would impact everything, right?
That's true. I feel like I remember something about there being a different CI policy for contrib extensions. Oh, if it fails CI, they just disable the extension. So certain contrib extensions have CI disabled, and that's how you eventually get unsupported. But I do think by default they run. Okay, that's fair. And I want to get to our last topic on the agenda, but I don't feel like we've heard. Well, I don't feel like I've heard from anybody except for me say that they're for it in some capacity. Trying to see if there's a consensus that we can arrive to in the next 2 minutes. Okay, Max in favor of the general idea. Lucas, to your question, ztunnel is an official part of the Istio repo, or the Istio project, excuse me. And so ztunnel maintainers are Istio maintainers, versus Envoy maintainers is different CI, different CNCF project. And so we just try to be a bit careful, explicit about when we're crossing project boundaries like that. Hey, Daniel in favor of the idea. So I guess in 1 minute, what changes to the current state would you like to see in order to get on board with doing it?
I would like to see if we can plug our CI there.
Yeah, test and CI.
Yeah, and ztunnel's different because it's 2 repos. Here we still have 3 repos, which is a bit egregious. Like the original goal of all this effort to move into Envoy proxy was to use Envoy's builds directly and not build them ourselves, which by the way, I don't think we should do. And we don't have even this proposal is not doing it, but that was kind of the original goal. So it feels like we had a goal and then we executed something, but it wasn't actually the original goal. And like, do we actually want to do this, or do we just think we want to do it because we had a different goal that we no longer want to do, and we're just have momentum?
So that goal predates me, but for what it's worth, I don't think we should or even could. Well, I think we could use Envoy's builds in some way, but as it currently stands, we have to sort of ship all of contrib. And I don't think we want to ship all of contrib. There would have to be like a separate build file, or Envoy would have to actually build Istio images and binaries, which I don't think Envoy wants to do.
Yeah, there's a large number of reasons why we shouldn't do it, I think. But that was the original goal that kicked off all this. So it just makes me worried that we're like doing this for reasons that don't actually exist anymore.
I thought one of the reasons that got brought up was to try to reduce the divergence between our builds and Envoy's builds. Like,
yeah, it was, but like, you know, we looked through the history. It's only happened like 8 times in the last 2 years, and each time it's, you know, fix something was a pointer, now it's not, that sort of thing. Is it really that big of a deal?
Basil mod will probably be. The hermetic builds was annoying. Yeah, I mean, Mikhail, you're a CI maintainer for Envoy upstream. Do you have a sense for how? Can you speak to how this might affect those the CI divergence?
Sorry, can you elaborate? CI divergence between Envoy and Istio build of proxy?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, will that make this better? Like, would hermetic builds, for example, and the work you had to do to deal with that, to fix that, would having the code of an Istio live in Envoy proxy have avoided some of that?
Well, yes, but like at the cost of losing some level of control, right? Like, for example, you brought up hermetic builds, right? We intentionally built proxy using like a pretty old version of libc. That's not the version that upstream Envoy used by default. Now they added support for the old version that we use there, but it wasn't there, and we wouldn't like notice an update easily to things like that.
Gotcha. I do want to move on. Seems like, and I want to send an answer to the folks in the chat. So, is it a fair representation for me to say that we want the CI, including integration tests, to be able to run in Envoy, and if we can do that, then we're generally in favor of this?
I think my thought is that this kind of feels like it's solving a problem that doesn't quite exist, and it seems like a good amount of work, and it's not clear why we're doing it. I think I just that's the conclusion I've arrived at in the last 10 minutes of thinking about this.
Daniel's answer is same in the chat. So okay, I would recommend. I'll ask folks to go through and read the chat, because I think Quat and ZRain and WBP Code have answered a couple of times. So yeah, I'll ask folks to go and read that.
Is this the issue?
Yes, and I've got the issue linked in the meeting notes, and it's shared on my screen right now.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we've got 7 minutes for one more topic. Metrics compression. Yeah, I think this is just a follow-up from our discussion last week, where we've got a couple of PRs that are open. One is this API PR. The first one would be API PR that just deprecates the old one, deprecates the old compression annotation, and adds a new bool that just turns it on and does the accept. Can't remember the exact header, but yeah, uses the on-wire negotiation for what compression format to use. My concern with the current state of this PR is that we're deprecating a thing and adding an alpha thing in the same release. But the compression annotation was already only alpha to begin with. So it might not be that big of a deal. In the couple minutes we have left, can anybody chime in to sort of break the tie on this and sort of ask any questions about how to proceed with the API change for stats compression?
Can someone remind me what the reason is for the deprecation?
The API is just not good. So right now, the API, the user has to specify what compression algorithm to use. But I think it's accept transcoding or something like that. Accept encoding. And on the actual client and server can pick the algorithm on the wire without relying on the annotation. So like there's just no reason for the API to have the actual algorithm be specified by the user.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, we may want an API to control the compression level. But I agree, the algorithm, at least for this use case, doesn't need to be configurable, seeing as it's the client that dictates what it solves.
Okay, are we fine with deprecating the old one since it's alpha? Or do we want to wait a release?
I mean, deprecation seems fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
alpha means we could deprecate it without a replacement, and that wouldn't be a violation of the policy. Not to mention, it seems like this is probably not widely used given the awkwardness of the API.
It's not unlikely.
Yeah, I guess the only question at the API level, if somebody used the alpha API, do we just now infer that that means stats compression equals true in the implementation, separate from the API?
I would think so, because if it was working before, they were using compression by explicitly selecting the algorithm, it should continue working, and probably with the same algorithm, because the negotiation would have to agree with what they specified, right?
There are some ordering implications if the accept transcoding header puts the algorithm in a different order than what the user specified, then they could get an algorithm that they don't want.
What, do we know what Prometheus by default sends?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Wait, Keith, how if it's the client asking for the compression algorithm, how do they end up getting one that they don't want? It would just change. Oh.
He didn't like your question.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, my connection dropped.
Did you hear my question?
No, I did not hear your question.
It was if it's a client that's sending the accept transcoding header, then how do they end up with one that they don't want? Like they could get a different one, but it's gonna be one that they want.
Unless the user is specifying something in the API that is a different a different priority than what is sent in the accept transcoding header, which again is basically misconfiguration, but it could happen.
Okay, yeah, I'm just saying like you'd still be choosing one that the client will accept.
Yes, it won't break. It just different compression algorithms have different impacts on memory versus CPU, different trade-offs, etc. So there are some second order effects that they might encounter because, oh, it turns out my accept encoding header has broadly first instead of G whatever. I forget what the other options are. And that creates some memory or CPU differences that I'm not expecting.
Seems really minor.
Yeah, fairly minor. Ian?
Is it configurable from like the Prometheus side? Can you tell Prometheus these are the ones I want you to try? Don't use other one.
I'm sure. And so that's why I say it's in my mind it's a category of a misconfiguration. And the risk that the user runs by using an alpha API.
Yeah, it seems like we could add an upgrade note that's like, hey, if you want tight control over this, that's moved to the client side. You know, look up how to do it in Prometheus or something.
Well, it seems like Prometheus really only supports gzip, so this is all a moot discussion anyway.
No, I think OTO Collector has more.
The OTel collector has more, but Prometheus
People
itself
use
does not.
OTel to scrape Prometheus now.
OTel scrapes Prometheus? Or okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
people
endpoint.
use OTel as Prometheus essentially.
Oh, I see. So OTel's doing the scraping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for the verification. Liam, since you're an actual user, do you know what your OTel pipeline is configured to use to scrape for an encoding? Or would prefer, presumably you prefer to use ZSTD, because gzip is actually the worst option here.
A different team owns this. I mean, I could go and look in our cluster now, but it would take me a while to get access. But I'm pretty sure it's gzip.
Yeah.
We'd probably prefer to use Z standard, yeah.
Or even LZ4 nowadays. Okay, so we're very unlikely to run into a compatibility issue, seeing as everything is probably doing gzip today.
I'll be honest. I'm not super worried about the compatibility issue with the deprecation because
either
it's alpha API, and my bias tends to be not shying away from pain when things are alpha, because I think that conditions people to treat alpha as alpha. So I was initially against deprecating and changing in one release, but when I learned it's alpha, that changed my mind. So, do you feel strongly, Louis, that we should, or I feel in general that we should try to help, like, avoid some of the pain? Okay.
Like if the only pain we're talking about is you accidentally moved from zip to gzip or gzip to deflate or something like that, that's pretty minor pain, and you have a clear API to work around it, or at least a clear described mechanism, which is go set up your accept encoding headers the right way.
Cool. All right, I think that gives this contributor what they need, so I will remove my hold on the API PR. And what did we decide on cherry picking for 129?
Well, so I would say one other thing. Since we're asking users to do some work, are we going to ask them to do work twice if we decide to? So which compressors do we now support? Because like in reality, the ideal would be LZ4 at this point for compute cost. So if we're going to ask people to do work, I don't want to ask them to go say add zip and deflate gzip now, and then later on go add LZ4 zip and gzip in that order in their accept encoding headings. They have to do it twice. I'd rather save people some work. It's not blocking, but if we had the bandwidth to do it, it seems like it would be a nice thing to do for our users.
Are you saying I'm confused what the work is. Are you saying that we need to go and add LZ4
so let's say we
to?
So let's say we have ZSTD and gzip support, right? And gzip is the worst option, right? So you'd rather everything sends an accept encoding header where gzip is the last option in the list. It's the most compatible one, but it's also the last option. Because we've implemented ZSTD, we serve the better option. And LZ4 is even better than ZSTD for compute to bandwidth ratio. So that, like, if they're going to do work, right, to absorb the API change, which we're totally fine with, right, because the worst case scenario is to get identity, then
What is the work that you're saying Istio should do?
no, it would be better if Istio implemented the compressors that we recommend people use.
Okay. I don't think we have enough time for that. Maybe we do, if we want to do 129, but I think before we, I think this annotation could probably has a path to get promoted to beta or GA. I think definitely before that we could implement the compressor that we want, but I'm less inclined to hold this up with the
Yeah,
code
no,
freeze
I wouldn't.
next
I
week.
wouldn't block this on it. I would just. This is a preference, right? If we could get it done, it would be better for our users.
That's probably true.
Okay. And maybe we should put it in the release notes and say we expect to implement in an upcoming release this, right? So just so you know.
That sounds right to me. I'll get the notification to I'll add some comments in the PR, and the other action item for networking maintainers is to also review the implementation as well. But I will unblock the merge of the API change.
Do we respect identity correctly?
In what way?
So identity, like, because accept encoding is an ordered list, if identity is the first thing on the list, you should not compress. If you support identity, which everybody does.
I'd have to look at the Envoy implementation. I have no idea.
Okay, all right. That's not that important.
Okay, well, we are over time, and apologies for that, folks. But yeah, we've got action items. Try to follow up with those. As a reminder, like I've said a couple of times, we've got code freeze coming up next Thursday. So we've got bug fixes or things like that before the release. Try to get them in before that time. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.